Jessie Morrison was born on July 25, 1995, in the small town of Greenville, Tennessee. She grew up in a big family. Her parents had 4 daughters, and because of that, Jessie always dreamed of building a big family of her own one day. Not long after finishing high school, she started dating a guy named William, and they had a son together. But the relationship didn't last. A while later, Jessie got into a relationship with a man named Gary, and she had another little boy. Then, about a year after that, when she was 21, she got pregnant again, and she and Gary got engaged, planning to get married soon. By late summer 2016, Jessie was living with her fiancé in a small town called Afton, about 6 miles from Greenville. She was 16 weeks pregnant at the time, and pretty much all her time and energy went into taking care of her 2 boys. On August 12th, Jessie's fiancé was expecting her back home, but as the evening dragged on, she never showed. Gary tried calling, but she didn't answer. He called her mom next, and she couldn't reach her either. And since Jessie had left earlier with her 2 little boys, who were just 3 and 1, it didn't take long for everyone to feel that something was seriously off. Then, they learned something even stranger. That morning, Jessie had dropped the kids off at their grandmother's and never came back for them. They waited a little longer, hoping she'd turn up. But as night got closer and Jessie still hadn't contacted anyone, they finally went to the police. When her mom and fiancé got to the station, officers told them Jessie had been missing for less than a day, and it was too soon to open a missing person case. But not long after that, detectives noticed something. Just a few hours earlier, another call had come in, one that might be connected to Jessie. Around 7:30 that evening, a local man was walking his dog along a quiet back road, about 9 miles outside of Afton. As he passed a small creek, he noticed something strange between the trees, and within seconds, he realized it was a human body. He ran back home to call police, and officers rushed to the area. The moment they saw the body, they knew it was a homicide. The victim had clear signs of violent injuries, so her body was sent to the medical examiner for a full examination. But the scene itself didn't give them much to work with. It looks like the killing had happened somewhere else, and the body had been dumped on that isolated road afterward. There were no personal items nearby, which made identification even harder. A few hours later, Jessie's family showed up at the police station to report her missing, and detectives soon connected the dots. Jessie's mother put up photos of her tattoos, and the medical examiner confirmed the same tattoos on the body. Later, investigators determined Jessie had died from multiple devastating blows to the head, likely from something like a crowbar. Then the amount of scrapes and scratches on her body suggested she'd fought back really hard. So detectives officially opened a homicide investigation and sent officers to search the area where the body had been found. A few miles away, they started finding Jessie's belongings scattered along the roadside, almost like someone had been tossing them out as they drove. First, they came across paperwork from her older son's hospital visit. Further down the road, they found a child's medical wristband, pieces of Jessie's driver's license, part of her phone case, a box of cereal, and a pack of cigarettes. Then, at another spot, officers recovered a pair of shorts, a diaper, and even more documents connected to the hospital visit. It didn't feel random at all. To detectives, it looked like someone had been tossing her belongings along the route to that remote spot, either before or after they dumped the body, trying to get rid of evidence. And the fact that her license had been cut into pieces made it feel like someone was trying to slow down identification and buy time. At the same time, detectives were interviewing Jessie's family to rebuild her last known movements. They said the last time they'd seen her was the day before everything happened, when Jessie's younger sister stopped by the house. Jessie was there with her kids and her fiancé, Gary, and they mostly talked about a small dental procedure Jessie's older son was scheduled to have the next morning. Her sister expected Jessie to call afterward and tell her how it went, but that call never came. Late that morning, Jessie did text her mother while she was still at the hospital. They'd already agreed her mom would stay over that night to help with the kids while her son recovered. But after that one message, Jessie went completely silent. Hour by hour, her family got more and more worried. By evening, they started searching on their own. Around 7:30 p.m., Jessie's sister and father drove to her house. But Jessie and the boys weren't there. They were met by Gary, who told them he'd only just gotten home from work and hadn't seen Jessie. And the kitchen made it even stranger. There were unopened grocery bags sitting out, like Jessie had just gotten back from the store, and then walked right back out without even putting the groceries away. From there, Jessie's sister called the older boy's grandmother on his father's side, since she regularly helped with both kids. The family hoped maybe Jessie had dropped them off there, but she said Jessie had been there earlier that day, then drove Jessie and the boys back home. And after that, she hadn't heard from Jessie either. Around 10 p.m., Jessie's mom tried calling the boy's grandmother, but she didn't answer. So Jessie's mom drove over to her house with Gary. The first thing she noticed was the grandmother's car. It was parked in a weird way, like someone had pulled in fast and didn't really care where it landed. They knocked, but no one came to the door, even though Jessie's mom could tell someone was definitely inside. She kept knocking, then started shouting that she'd call the police if they didn't open up. Only then did the grandmother finally come to the door. Inside, Jessie's mom found both kids, but Jessie wasn't there. The grandmother claimed she'd dropped Jessie off at home a few hours earlier, and they decided to keep the boys with her because Jessie couldn't handle the younger one, who'd been throwing a tantrum. Jessie's family didn't buy it for a second. They couldn't wrap their heads around Jessie leaving her kids behind, especially when her older son had just had a procedure and needed care. Jessie's mom also told police this wasn't the first time they'd clashed with the grandmother, Vonda Smith. In their eyes, she was way too involved in the boys' lives. The family appreciated the help. She watched them a lot, but Vonda could also get controlling, like she wanted to run the show. In just days before Jessie vanished, there'd been another blow-up. Jessie had asked Vonda to watch the kids that weekend. Vonda agreed, but then Jessie suddenly canceled at the last minute. According to her family, Vonda was furious. Investigators decided to speak with her and showed up at Vonda's house around 2 a.m. First, they told her Jessie was dead, and her reaction fell off. Instead of breaking down, Vonda stayed oddly calm. She just asked, almost flatly, "Is she really dead?" And then immediately added, "I haven't seen her." Only after that did detectives ask when she'd last seen Jessie, and Vonda's timeline didn't match what Jessie's mother had been told. According to Vonda, Jessie showed up at the hospital where Vonda worked at around 1 p.m. Jessie asked if she could watch the boys because the younger one was acting up, and she couldn't calm him down. Vonda agreed, left work early, and the two of them, with the kids, went to a supermarket to grab some groceries. After that, Vonda said she drove Jessie and the boys to Jessie's house, where they dropped the bags off inside. Then they all went back to Vonda's place. Vonda claimed she gave Jessie about $1,000 because Jessie was struggling financially and had bills to pay. On top of that, she loaned Jessie her car, and she drove off. Vonda said that around 6:30 that evening, she noticed a white van pull up outside her house. She looked out the window and saw her own car sitting there again, and a man getting out of it, then climbing into the van and leaving. She told detectives that, in the moment, she thought the man might have been Gary, Jessie's fiancé, but she couldn't say that for sure. Vonda also said that she never actually saw Jessie during that moment. Detectives asked if they could take a look at her car, and she agreed. But then she added something weird. She warned them the inside smelled strongly like cat urine because her sister's cat had messed on one of the seats a few days earlier. She said she tried to scrub the interior with bleach, but the smell still wouldn't go away. As soon as investigators started checking the inside of the car, they spotted multiple reddish stains that looked like blood, mostly on the front passenger seat. They also noticed smudges on the window next to it, like someone had recently tried to wipe it down. Crime scene techs collected samples and sent them to the lab, and experts later confirmed the stains were Jessie's blood. That process took a few weeks, and during that time, detectives questioned Vonda over and over. and little by little, cracks started showing. At first, she insisted she hadn't seen Jessie that evening, but later she changed her story and said she actually saw Jessie get into the white van. Other details shifted too, and it was starting to feel like her timeline wasn't just messy, it was being rewritten. Detectives also pulled messages between Vonda and Jessie, and those texts backed up something Jessie's family had been saying from the start. Vonda was furious when Jessie canceled the plan to leave the kids with her for the weekend. By this point, investigators were seriously considering that Vonda was directly involved, and they laid out what they believed happened. In their view, Vonda wanted as much time with the children as possible, and she didn't take it well when Jessie pushed back. She may have seen it as disrespect, or even ingratitude, especially because she'd been helping Jessie constantly. Not only was she watching both boys regularly, including the child who wasn't even her biological grandchild, but she also seemed to be giving Jessie large amounts of money. Some of that was backed up by surveillance footage from the supermarket they visited that day. Vonda paid for all the groceries, and according to Vonda herself, she gave Jessie another $1,000 afterward to help cover bills. Detectives believed Jessie canceling that weekend visit was what finally pushed things over the edge. In their view, Vonda snapped. An argument escalated fast, and Jessie was killed. After that, they think Vonda moved the body, ditched Jessie's belongings, and then tried to clean the car out after using it to transport her. But even bleach couldn't erase everything. In the end, detectives decided to arrest Vonda, and she was charged with a double murder because Jessie was pregnant at the time she died. Jessie's family also believed Vonda was the most likely suspect, but her defense attorney immediately started pointing out some major inconsistencies. First, they questioned whether Vonda could have physically pulled it off at all. She was only about 4 feet 10 inches, and she had serious health issues that limited what she could do. Jessie, after all, didn't die from one quick blow. The medical examiner said it was a series of brutal hits to the head, something the defense argued Vonda simply wasn't capable of. On top of that, Jessie's body had a lot of scrapes and scratches, suggesting a prolonged struggle. No one had formally examined Vonda for similar injuries, but detectives said that in the early days of the investigation, they didn't notice bruises or scratches on her. The defense also pointed to surveillance footage from the store, showing Vonda and Jessie calmly shopping together just a few hours before the murder. To the attorney, that didn't match the idea that Vonda was so enraged she snapped and killed her. And then there was the money. Vonda claimed she gave Jessie $1,000 that day, but that cash was never found with Jessie's belongings or near her body. What's more, police discovered Jessie wasn't actually behind on any bills at the time, even though she supposedly told Vonda she was struggling to pay them. Soon, Vonda's attorney found 2 witnesses whose statements cast even more doubt on the detective's theory. 2 separate neighbors said they saw Jessie near her home at around 5 p.m. What's more, they both noticed a white van parked out front, and one of them even said they watched Jessie get into it. According to them, there were 2 men inside the van, but neither neighbor could make out their faces. Police followed up on that lead and discovered that on the very same day, Gary's father, who lived in the same house as Gary and Jessie, had spent a lot of time with a friend who owned a white van. When detectives interviewed the 2 men, they admitted they'd been running errands in that van for most of the day, and they backed each other up with alibis. Gary's father initially claimed they'd stopped by his house sometime between 4:30 and 5 p.m., but later he walked that back and said it was probably closer to 3 p.m. Investigators also learned that Gary's father had a lengthy criminal record and that he was currently facing charges involving drugs and weapons. On top of that, Vonda's attorneys insisted they had proof she'd cleaned her car before the murder ever happened. He said that around 7 p.m., Vonda drove to a friend's house because the friend had asked her to watch her granddaughter. That friend later told investigators she didn't see any blood in the car where her granddaughter got in, and she said if she had, she never would have let the child ride in it. The granddaughter said the same thing. During the entire drive, she didn't notice a single stain. On top of that, Vonda's friend said they even talked about the seat that had been ruined by the cat. Vonda's sister backed that up too. She confirmed they'd been discussing it days before Jessie died. But there was one catch. When Vonda's friend put her granddaughter in the car, the front passenger seat was covered with a towel, supposedly so the cat smell wouldn't soak into anyone's clothes. And that was the exact seat where investigators later found the most blood, even though there were traces elsewhere in the car too. The idea that there couldn't have been blood in the car at that point didn't sit right with anyone, because all of this was happening only about half an hour before Jessie's body was found. In other words, if that car had been used to move her, there should have been blood in it, and those stains couldn't have just appeared later. And the most conflicting evidence was still ahead. For months, lab analysts tested sample after sample from Jessie's body, and what they found only made the case messier. Under Jessie's fingernails, they recovered 3 separate DNA samples, all belonging to unknown males. The samples were too small to build full profiles, but there was still enough there to compare them against the men closest to the case. Investigators collected DNA from Jessie's fiancé, his father, the friend with the white van, her ex, and even Vonda's husband, and every single one of them was ruled out. Another male DNA sample was found on the torn-up pieces of Jessie's driver's license, but again, the lab couldn't match it to anyone. On some of Jessie's other belongings, they found female DNA as well, but it didn't match Vonda or any of the other women in Jessie's close circle. On top of that, 2 fingerprints were recovered from Jessie's shattered phone case, and neither of them belonged to anyone investigators had looked at. But the strangest discovery was on Jessie's underwear. Lab tests found 2 separate semen samples. One matched Jessie's fiancé, Gary. The second one belonged to an unidentified male. And to this day, they still haven't been able to pin down who it came from. So, by this point, the defense had built a pretty solid list of reasons to doubt Vonda's involvement. But prosecutors came back with something much harder to brush off. They brought in a bloodstain pattern expert. After examining the inside of the car, the expert concluded that Jessie had been transported in the front passenger seat, from wherever she was killed to the creek where her body was later found. The placement of the stains lined up with Jessie's body in a way that was almost impossible to explain any other way. And there was another key detail. The blood collected from those stains was mixed with bleach. That meant someone tried to clean the seat after Jessie's body had been there, not days earlier. If Vonda had only used bleach because of the cat smell earlier that week, the tests wouldn't have come back like that. The experts' conclusions suggested something even darker. Vonda really did scrub that car with bleach on the day Jessie was killed, which directly contradicted what she'd been telling investigators. And that towel on the passenger seat may not have been about a cat at all. It could have been there to hide bloodstains and damp upholstery. The trial began in 2018, 2 years after Jessie was killed. By then, both sides had built up a long list of arguments, some pointing to Vonda's involvement, and others suggesting she might have been innocent. Even with all that time, though, investigators still didn't have answers to the biggest questions: where Jessie was actually killed, and what happened to the weapon used to beat her. Still, the jury found Vonda guilty on 2 counts: first-degree murder for Jessie's death, and second-degree murder because Jessie was pregnant. She was sentenced to life in prison, plus another 25 years, to be served concurrently. Throughout the entire trial, Vonda never said a word. She didn't testify, and she didn't speak in her own defense. After the conviction, a well-known attorney who often takes on questionable cases got interested in her file. He believed Vonda may have been covering for the real killer. In his view, the prosecutor's evidence showed one thing for sure: her car was used to transport Jessie's body. But there still wasn't solid proof that Vonda herself took part in the actual murder. And then, another detail came out. Early on, detectives tried to track Jessie's phone, and the last signal they picked up was near the area where some of her belongings were later found. But the original document with that information was lost. and Vonda's defense didn't learn about it until almost the start of trial, when it was basically too late to make use of it. In 2020, Vonda's appeal was heard, but the court upheld her conviction. And only after that ruling did something new come out. Vonda had suddenly changed her story, but only in conversations with her new attorneys. Up until then, she'd always said she saw a white van outside her house, and that she thought the person in it might have been Jessie's fiancé, Gary. But Gary had a solid alibi for the time of the murder. He was at work. Now, Vonda claimed it wasn't Gary at all. She said it was William, her own son, and the father of Jessie's first child. She didn't give any extra details beyond that, and as of today, Vonda is still serving her sentence. In 2025, she filed a motion asking for a new trial or for her conviction to be overturned, but there's been no decision yet, and it's not clear whether her attorney submitted any new evidence that could actually move the court. Later on, Vonda's husband and William both said they had no idea why she changed her statement and suddenly claimed she'd seen William in that white van. During the original investigation, police never found a real reason to suspect William. He and Jessie had split up before their son was even born, more than 3 years before the murder. Still, in theory, you can point to a couple of possible motives, but none of them are backed by anything solid, legally speaking. One idea is custody. In court, it came up that Gary didn't want William involved in the kids' lives, and some people have suggested William might have been afraid he'd lose access to his son. And that fear is what pushed him to do something unthinkable. Another possible motive is financial. Maybe he was worried that Jessie would take him to court for child support. Or maybe he resented the fact that his mother was constantly giving Jessie large amounts of money. So basically, the theory is that Vonda may have helped her son cover this up, and that William was the real killer. But none of those ideas were ever backed up by solid evidence. Over all these years, William was never officially treated as a suspect, and from an official standpoint, his involvement isn't being pursued. Officially, the only person held responsible for Jessie's death is Vonda, and nothing about that has changed since the verdict. The only way this case moves in any real direction is if Vonda comes forward with something concrete, and without supporting evidence, it could all remain just words. It's also worth noting that even now, a lot of Vonda's friends and relatives still believe she had nothing to do with the murder, and they flat out refuse to accept that she could have done something like this. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.